It's now possible to create HDR or high dynamic range photographs from right inside of Adobe Camera. After you've selected the images that you want to work with, they will appear in the film strip on the left. And here you can see that we have images which were captured at different exposure settings. And what we want to do is combine these together so that we have an image with a wider dynamic range. Step 1 is to open up the images, and then step 2 is to select them. So click on one and then hold down the Shift key and click on another, or press Command A on a Mac or Control A on Windows. After you've selected the files you want to work with, next step is in the film strip. Go to the upper right-hand corner and click on the flyout menu icon right there and choose Merge to HDR. Here, go ahead and click on that. And what will happen is Photoshop or Camera Raw will do some thinking here, and it will work to begin to build out of these different exposures an image which has more of a dynamic range. And what we'll start to see with these type of images is that the look will not be hugely distinct initially, but we can start to use our sliders in more dramatic ways once we've built this file. Well, here I'll go ahead and give Camera Raw a second in order to generate this file. Well, now that it's created this image for us, you can see we are in our HDR Merge preview. We have a couple options on the right-hand side. The first one, you almost always want to leave on. It's Auto or Align Images. This makes sure that in case the camera moved or something moved, that the images are aligned perfectly. The other one is Auto Tone. This just gives you an idea of how you might want to process the photograph. You don't need to go with this, and you can always change this later. But I like to leave that option on because it just gets you sort of in that mode of having this image with all of this range, that we can see that this area we have much more detail in, and it's bringing out detail in brighter areas and also darker areas. Now, what about deghosting? Deghosting is helpful if you have trees and they're swaying in the wind, and it gets rid of that. You can choose different options. Here I'll go ahead and select medium to see what movement we had in this image. And in this case, with this particular photograph, we're going to see that the movement wasn't due to wind, but to the movement of the cars on the road. All right, well, let's give it a minute to update here. All right, so now here it's showing us its deghosting option. If it's hard to identify the area where it applied a change, click on Show Overlay. Here it's showing me in red that it primarily worked on this area, again, because some of the moving cars there. In this case, I don't think that looks very good, so I'll just go back to turning that off because it looked a little bit better, I think, having this car stationary in that area. Yeah, you want to choose the option which works best for your photograph. And then next click Merge, and it will open up our Save As dialog. Here we can save this file out in the same exact location, and it will save it as a DNG file. We'll click Save, and what it will do is it will then create this new file for us, and it will show us this file in our film strip back in the Camera Raw dialog. Now that we have the image back in the Camera Raw dialog, what we can do is begin to make adjustments. You'll notice that the automatic adjustments here are already applied. If you want to go back to the default settings, you can do that. And here we could modify our own adjustments or make our own adjustments, recovering detail or adding contrast or crafting the look that we want to create. And one of the advantages of working with an HDR image is that because it has the tonality from all of these different exposures, we can kind of get away with making more dramatic adjustments. But just because we can doesn't necessarily mean we need to. In other words, it doesn't need to look like a super HDR image, or if you wanted to, you could always make those type of adjustments to have this really wide latitude of tonality and create that type of a look. Really, it's all about customizing the way that you want that look to appear. And here I'll just make a few subtle adjustments in order to change the overall look that we have with this photograph. Then if we tap the P key, you can see the before, this was the original or default settings. Tap it again, then there's the after we've customized our own. Now this is a DNG file, which means it's flexible. We can work with it non-destructively. In order to apply the settings, just click Done. And if ever you want to come back to the file, just double click it to reopen it in Camera Raw, and then you can further customize your sliders in order to craft the way that you want your HDR photograph to look.